Okay, Mr. Ben Cline, also from Virginia, you have 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I was inspired by the remarks of my colleague from Virginia. So I want to thank Director Swagel for being here, for coming back. You know, the CBO plays an important supporting role to Congress, forecasting long-term budget outlooks and scoring legislation to determine its fiscal impact. But like everything else in Washington, CBO needs oversight and reform to counteract Washington's deep-rooted culture of needless spending. For instance, one good reason for today's hearing is that a very important year for tax policy is just around the corner, and we must ensure that CBO is prepared to make accurate projections for the many policy proposals being considered, as well as their fiscal outcomes. While some of the fixes that need to be made may be derived from internal process reforms at CBO, others may involve reforming the statutory requirements imposed on CBO by Congress to resolve these ongoing problems. So Director Swagel, the baseline that CBO is required to produce is often described as reflecting current law, but that's not really accurate, is it? Could you describe the deviations from current law that are built into the baseline?
No, very good. And we talked about administrative actions a minute ago. There's others that with programs that have trust funds, Social Security, for example, by law, the baseline is required to provide the numbers as if Social Security benefits are paid even when the trust fund is exhausted. And so that's a deviation from the law.
And compared to a theoretical baseline that's calculated without these assumptions, does the official baseline assume outlays that are higher or lower?
It would generally be higher in the example of the trust funds that are going to be exhausted.
And what about revenues?
Well, on the revenue side, we're required to include current law. And so the expiration of the provisions of the 2017 Act in 2025, the baseline shows a jump up in revenues because that's current law.
By more than 20 trillion over 10 years, right?
That's right. It's a big jump up.
So as CBO itself has stated, CBO's baseline is not intended to be a forecast of budgetary outcomes. Rather, it's meant to provide a neutral benchmark that policymakers can use to assess the potential effects of policy decisions.
It's a benchmark, and in some sense, you highlighted this asymmetry between the spending side and the revenue side. The revenues just follow current law, whereas in some ways, big parts of spending deviate from current law. So it's a benchmark. It's not neutral between spending and revenue, but it's definitely a benchmark.
That was my follow-up question.
Okay.
Given the distortions that CBO is required by law to incorporate that make spending and revenues appear higher than they would be under actual current law, the baseline is not actually a neutral benchmark.
Yeah.
And would you agree that improvements could be made to existing law to enable CBO to produce a more accurately neutral benchmark?
Okay, no, very good. I'll say one improvement I've made is deleting the word neutral from our budget reports. So you will see we describe it as a benchmark and not a neutral benchmark.
Well, but wouldn't you agree that maybe in addition to what you do, that producing a neutral benchmark would be a goal that that members would find helpful?
I do agree, and we do already do it both ways. That with Social Security, we do provide information on both scheduled benefits and on payable benefits. So that's an example. Some members prefer it one way or the other, but so whatever information is helpful to you and your colleagues, that's what I want to get to you.
Okay. Well, I've got some legislation that will help you to achieve that
That's great.
neutrality. So I'll look forward to working with you on that, Mr. Chairman. With that, I yield back.